Fear is a master at creating scenarios that never happen. How many times have you lost sleep, imagining everything that could go wrong? The criticism that never came, the failure that never happened, the rejection that only existed in your mind. The truth is, most of our fears aren't facts. They're stories we tell ourselves, stories so well told that they end up paralyzing us before we even try. But the Stoics already knew this 2,000 years ago. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And he was right. What holds us back is not the actual obstacle, but how we think about it. Fear is like a shadow. It seems huge when it's in the light, but when you get closer, you realize it's much smaller than you imagined. And here's the bottom line. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is acting even when fear is present. It's using fear as a signal that you're moving toward what matters, not as an order to stop. Insecurity will never completely disappear, but it loses strength every time you choose to move forward, even shakily, even imperfectly. Today I want to show you 7 simple yet powerful Stoic practices that can change the way you deal with fear. These are steps that great philosophers used to face external battles and especially internal battles. And if you apply them, you'll discover that the clarity and strength you seek aren't in the future. They arise the very moment you decide to act, despite your insecurity. Before we begin, make a commitment to yourself. Write it in the comments below. Today, I act despite fear. This simple statement already begins to change the direction of your mind, because life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It starts now with the decision to take a step forward. 1. See fear as a teacher, not an enemy. Fear has always been portrayed as an invisible enemy, something to be defeated, avoided, or ignored. But what if I told you that fear can actually be a master? Think about all the times you've felt fear in your life. It's appeared when speaking in public, when making an important decision, when taking a risk. What do all these moments have in common? Fear only appears when something is at stake. It doesn't come to the weak. It comes precisely when you're about to grow. Marco Aurelio wrote, "The obstacle is the path." This phrase contains a profound truth. What you avoid is precisely what has the power to transform you. Fear is the red light flashing on the road of life, but not to stop you, to warn you that there lies a point of evolution. When you see fear as a teacher, you begin to ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to show me? Instead of running away, you learn to listen. Consider the example of a warrior in training. If he never feels fear, he will never test his own courage. If he always fights weak enemies, he will never discover his true strength. Fear, in this sense, is like a harsh trainer who puts extra weight on you to make you stronger. The problem is that most of us view this trainer as an enemy and abandon our training. Seneca said, "A life without challenges is a life without glory." Fear is part of these challenges. It's what separates those who dream from those who do. How many projects have you stopped from starting because fear told you, "What if it doesn't work?" How many words were choked because fear whispered, "What if they laugh at you?" And how many opportunities have you missed because you believed that feeling of insecurity was an order to stop? Fear was never meant to be a barrier. You're the one who interpreted it that way. Now imagine if, when you feel fear, you changed the question. Instead of "What if I fail?" but ask, "What can I learn here?" Fear stops being paralyzing and becomes a guide. It points out the areas where you still need to grow, the areas that are not yet mature. If you fear public speaking, perhaps it's because there's a voice inside you that needs work. If you fear rejection, perhaps it's because you haven't yet built confidence in who you truly are. Every fear carries a mirror. And this is where Stoicism offers us a practical lesson. Fear shouldn't be fought, it should be integrated. Epictetus taught that it's not what happens that disturbs us, but how we interpret it. This also applies to fear. It's not a monster that appears to destroy you, but a reflection of your interpretation. If you see it as an enemy, it paralyzes you. If you see it as a teacher, it prepares you. Today's practice is simple. Whenever you feel fear, don't fight it or run away. Write on a piece of paper, "What is this fear trying to teach me?" Then write down at least one answer. you'll realize that most of the time, fear is simply revealing potential for growth. If it's fear of making mistakes, the lesson is learning to get back up. If it's fear of rejection, the lesson is learning to accept yourself. If it's fear of starting, the lesson is learning to trust the process. When you change your perspective, fear loses its power to paralyze. It ceases to be a dark enemy and becomes a demanding but fair teacher. And the more you learn from it, the clearer the path becomes. Write in the comments, "Today, I choose to learn from fear." This is the attitude that transforms insecurity into clarity and turns obstacles into stepping stones. Because in the end, fear isn't against you. It's always been by your side, showing you where you still need to strengthen yourself to become who you were born to be. 2. Remember the brevity of life, memento mori. Few ideas have as much power to dissolve fear as this one. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. At first glance, it seems like a heavy, almost morbid thought. But for the Stoics, it was the opposite. It wasn't about worshipping death, but about awakening to life. Because when you remember that time is short, you realize you can no longer afford to live a prisoner of insecurity. Marco Aurelio wrote, "You could leave life now." Let that determine what you do, think, and feel. This phrase wasn't poetry, it was practical. He ruled an empire, but he also knew he could lose everything in an instant. The most powerful emperor of the time reminded himself daily that life is fleeting. If even he used this reminder to act courageously, why do we continue to wait for the right moment to begin? Fear grows when we believe we have infinite time. One day I'll take a risk. One day I'll change. One day I'll say what I feel. This one day is the greatest illusion the mind creates. The truth is that every time you choose fear, you're giving away a piece of time that will never return. Insecurity seems enormous until you place it alongside finiteness. Then suddenly, it shrinks. Seneca said, "It's not that we have little time to live, it's that we waste so much." And that's exactly what we do when we let fear decide for us. We waste moments that could be memories, opportunities that could be achievements, relationships that could be true. Fear, most of the time, doesn't protect. It just postpones. And to postpone is to choose not to live. Think for a moment. 100 years from now, no one will remember if you flubbed a presentation, if you were rejected for an invitation, if you stumbled while trying something new. But you will know, even too late, that you missed out on experiences because of a fear that was never real. That's what memento mori shows us, that what seems huge today may be irrelevant tomorrow, and that living with courage is always better than dying full of regrets. Fear is loud, but the brevity of life is louder. When you understand that each day is a unique opportunity, you begin to give less space to the voices that paralyze you. Because there is no guaranteed tomorrow. The only certainty we have is this moment, and the more aware you are of this, the bolder you become. You stop seeking perfection and start seeking presence. You stop accumulating excuses and start accumulating experiences. Today's practice is simple. When you feel fear, ask yourself, will this still matter in 5 years? Most of the time, the answer will be no. And if it won't matter in 5 years, it shouldn't rob you of your courage today. This exercise shifts the scale. Suddenly you realize that what seemed like a wall was just a shadow. Memento mori isn't about preparing for death, it's about preparing for life. It's remembering that every moment wasted in insecurity is a moment stolen from something that could truly bring meaning. It's understanding that life doesn't begin when fear disappears, but when you decide to move through it. If this lesson touched you, write in the comments. Today, I live with courage because time is too short to live in fear. This simple statement is a commitment to presence, because the clock is ticking, and every step you take toward courage is, in fact, a celebration of the life that still pulses within you. 3. Cut out the scenarios your mind makes up. Fear rarely arises from reality, it's born from imagination. Your mind creates detailed stories about what could go wrong, and you, without realizing it, begin to live within these fictional scripts as if they were inevitable. You haven't even spoken yet, and you already believe you'll be rejected. You haven't even tried yet, and you're already convinced you'll fail. You haven't even stepped onto the stage, and you already feel ashamed of an audience that doesn't even exist. It's as if your mind were a dramatic screenwriter, always writing tragedies that never happen. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." This is one of the most relevant phrases in Stoic philosophy. Because in practice, most of the fears that paralyze us are merely projections. They aren't in the present, they're in a future we've invented. Insecurity grows precisely in this empty space between what's real and what could be. How many times have you noticed this? You worry for days about an important conversation, rehearsing every word, feeling the weight of anxiety. When it finally happens, everything is much simpler than you imagined. The fear dissipated the moment reality set in. This demonstrates something powerful. Fear is always greatest before the fact. Once you act, the mind loses the material for fantasizing. But why do we give so much power to these invented scenarios? Because the mind loves to feel in control. It thinks that by imagining all the bad possibilities, it will prepare for them. But in practice, this doesn't strengthen us. It just tires us out. We waste energy on battles that will never happen. We experience defeats that never existed. Epictetus taught that the problem isn't the facts themselves, but our interpretation of them. The same goes for scenarios created by the mind. When you believe your imagination is reality, you become a prisoner of interpretations. Clarity arises when you can separate fact from supposition. Here's a simple Stoic practice to break this cycle. Every time fear arises, ask yourself, is this fact or is it supposition? If it's fact, deal with it now. If it's assumption, discard it. This creates a clear line between what demands your energy and what just deserves silence. It's like cleaning out a room full of useless objects. Suddenly, the space feels lighter, and you can see what really matters. Another powerful exercise is to write your fears down on paper. Place the phrase that scares you in front of you. I will fail. I will be rejected. I am not capable. Then ask yourself, where's the evidence for this? You'll realize that most of these thoughts are unfounded, merely echoes of old insecurities. When they leave your head and become words, they lose some of their power. Think about it. Fear will always be a storyteller. The difference lies in whether or not you believe in the plot. If you accept every narrative as truth, you're stuck in movies that never come out. But when you learn to cut through these mental scripts, you discover that reality, even with its challenges, is much simpler and more bearable than the fantasies your mind creates. Today's practice is clear. Whenever fear arises, stop and say out loud, "That's just a made-up scenario." Repeat until your body understands. This brief pause is enough to dispel confusion and bring clarity back. If this lesson spoke to you, write in the comments, "Today I cut off the fears that only exist in my mind." Because life isn't what you imagine will happen, it's what actually happens. And when you learn to cut through the fabricated scenarios, fear loses its power and you regain the space to act. 4. Strengthen your mind with small daily actions. Courage isn't born from a sudden leap. It's built, day after day, through small acts of discipline and confrontation. Many people make the mistake of believing they'll only overcome fear when they feel confident enough, but it's just the opposite. Confidence is born from action. It's in the act of taking a step, even a shaky one, that you send the message to your mind, "I can do it." Epictetus said that no one becomes great by chance. Just as the body needs constant training to gain strength, the mind needs daily exercise to become firm. There's no point waiting for a heroic moment to prove your courage. A hero is formed in the details, in the seemingly small choices you make every day. Think of something simple. Getting up early when your mind is asking for more sleep, finishing a task even when you're unmotivated, facing a difficult conversation instead of putting it off. These acts may seem trivial, but they carry a profound truth. Every time you fulfill something you promised yourself, you build inner confidence. It's like laying bricks in a foundation. And the more solid that foundation, the less room fear has to take hold. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning, Today I will encounter ungrateful, envious, and rude people, but none of this can hurt me unless I allow it. This daily exercise wasn't for moments of glory, but to prepare the mind for everyday life. The secret isn't in waiting for the big challenge, but in training the spirit in small doses every day, like strengthening invisible muscles. Insecurity, deep down, is the result of lack of practice. The less you act, the more your mind creates stories, and the more you act, the more these stories lose strength. It's like stepping into cold water. Most of the discomfort is felt in the first few seconds. Then your body adapts, and you realize it was bearable all along. Life works that way too. Here's today's Stoic practice. Choose a small, uncomfortable action and do it. It doesn't have to be grand. It could be starting a conversation you've been putting off, putting your phone away for an hour, walking without distractions, or completing a task without procrastinating. The key is to act, not wait. Every small gesture is a practice, and each practice strengthens your mind for bigger challenges. Seneca said that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, and this preparation happens now, in the daily choices that seem insignificant. Because when the big opportunity or the big challenge appears, you won't have time to practice. It will be too late. Only those who have already prepared themselves with small actions will have the strength to act with clarity. Remember, fear doesn't disappear all at once, but it diminishes each time you prove to yourself that you're bigger than your excuses. Accumulating small victories builds an unshakable mind, and this mind, strengthened in daily life, is capable of weathering any storm. If this lesson made sense to you, write in the comments. Today I train my courage in small steps, because in the end it's not great deeds that build courage, but the daily, invisible gestures that strengthen your mind until insecurity has nowhere left to hide. But there's something important to understand. If you've been trying for a long time to step out of your comfort zone and learn more, but haven't been able to, there might be something you're not aware of. I know what it might be. Anxiety. Anxiety is like a snake that creeps up silently and affects you without you even realizing it. It leaves you feeling unwell for days, months, and even years. Living like this is like being sick all the time. But I know a solution. Stoic philosophers, along with modern psychology, have a way to help you get rid of it. I managed to cure myself of this anxiety. I made a video explaining how you can get rid of this problem, and it's in the first comment. Click the link in the first comment and start healing yourself from this feeling of anxiety. 5. Question your limiting beliefs. Most of our fears don't come from the real world, but from the stories we believe about ourselves. They're ancient voices, often inherited from childhood, family, school, and past experiences. They say things like, "You're not good enough. You always fail. This path isn't for you." And the most dangerous thing is that, after repeating them so often, you begin to accept these phrases as absolute truths. Without realizing it, you begin to live inside an invisible prison built by your own mind. Epictetus said, "It is not the things that disturb us, but the opinions we have about them." This also applies to the opinions we hold about ourselves. The world doesn't paralyze you. What paralyzes you are the interpretations you've accepted without question. A limiting belief works like a dirty pair of lenses. It distorts your vision and makes you see obstacles where there might only be opportunities. How many times have you failed to act because you believed in the voice of fear more than in your own abilities? Maybe you turned down a job opportunity because you thought you weren't ready. Maybe you avoided an important conversation because you believed you weren't worthy enough. Maybe you postponed a dream because you grew up hearing that it wasn't for you. But stop for a moment and ask yourself, is this voice really mine, or did I just inherit it? Limiting beliefs are like outdated software running in the back of your mind. They were programmed in another time for another version of you, but they still influence every decision you make. The problem isn't feeling fear. The problem is letting these beliefs define what you can and can't experience. The Stoics teach us to confront these ideas. Marcus Aurelius often wrote to himself, questioning his thoughts until he arrived at the truth. This practice of self-examination is essential. When you put your beliefs to the test of reason, many of them vanish like smoke. Because most of them aren't facts, they're just interpretations, and interpretations can be revised. Here's a practical exercise. Grab a piece of paper and write down a belief that's been limiting you. Something like, I always fail, nobody takes me seriously, I can't change. Then ask, is this true or just a story I repeat? Ask yourself, what is the evidence against this belief? You'll realize that at various points in your life, you've done the opposite. You've been right, you've been heard, you've changed. In other words, this belief isn't reality, it's just a narrative. With each challenged belief, a space of freedom emerges, and in that space, you can choose a new way of thinking. Instead of saying, I always fail, you can say, I make mistakes, but I learn and improve. Instead of nobody takes me seriously, declare, I build respect through my actions. Instead of I can't change, say, I've changed before, I can change again. Questioning isn't denying reality, it's seeing reality without the filters of insecurity. And the more you practice this process, the clearer it becomes to realize that your limiting beliefs never had power on their own. You were the one feeding them. Today's practice is simple. Choose a belief that's been holding you back and write an empowering version of it next to it. Repeat this new phrase every time the old one arises. Gradually, your mind will adapt to this new narrative. And when your mind changes, your actions change. If this lesson spoke to you, write in the comments, today I choose to question my beliefs and build courage, because in the end, it's not fear that limits us most, but the stories we choose to believe. And when you change the story, you change destiny. 6. Surround yourself with examples of courage. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. Just observe. When someone around you despairs, your mind tends to enter the same state of alert. But when you see someone face danger with determination, something inside you awakens. It's as if that person's courage acts as a mirror, reminding you that you can be strong too. Therefore, choosing the examples you allow into your life is one of the most powerful practices for overcoming insecurity. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that much of what he learned about virtue came from observing teachers and friends who cultivated strength of character. He saw in others a pattern of conduct he aspired to emulate. This is a key point of Stoic philosophy. Virtue is learned both through study and through interaction. Just as toxic environments breed fear, environments of courage breed confidence. Think about the people you spend most of your time with. Do they reinforce your strength or intensify your insecurities? We often don't realize it, but we're surrounded by voices that fuel doubt. Friends who discourage us, family members who project their own fears, colleagues who constantly point out what could go wrong. When you absorb these voices, you end up living not only your own fears, but also the fears of others. On the other hand, when you surround yourself with good role models, you begin to naturally adopt the same pattern of courage. Reading about someone who overcame impossible obstacles, hearing the story of someone who turned failure into strength, interacting with people who act despite being insecure, all of this acts as fuel for your own mind, because courage is an energy that multiplies. Seneca said, while we teach, we learn. And similarly, as we admire examples of fortitude, we begin to absorb them. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Simply model the actions of those who have demonstrated courage before. This can be through books, biographies, historical stories, or even small gestures from ordinary people around you. Here's today's practice. Choose a source of courage to feed your mind every day. It could be reading a page of Stoic philosophy, listening to an inspiring speech, watching an interview with someone who overcame great fears, or simply observing someone close to you who acts with determination in life. Make this a habit, just like eating or sleeping. Because just as the body needs nourishment, the mind needs examples. And remember, insecurity grows when you believe you're alone in the fight. But when you realize that others have faced similar fears and overcome them, your own burden becomes lighter. It's like entering a battle knowing you're neither the first nor the last to go through it, and that everyone who came before has left footprints for you to follow. Surround yourself with courage, and it will begin to feel natural. Surround yourself with fear, and it will multiply. The choice lies in which voices you choose to listen to, which stories you choose to nurture, and which examples you choose to follow. If this lesson touched you, write in the comments. Today, I choose to surround myself with courage, because in the end, the mind is shaped by what it consumes. And when you decide to nourish yourself with strong examples, you discover that courage was always within you. It just needed the right mirror to awaken it. 7. Argue before feeling early. One of the biggest misconceptions that fuels insecurity is the idea that, in order to act, you first need to feel confident. How many times have you thought, "When I feel ready, I'll start"? This thought seems logical, but it's a trap. The truth is, confidence doesn't come before action, it's born during action. Waiting to feel ready is like waiting for a storm to pass without realizing you need to learn how to navigate it. Seneca said, "It's not because things are difficult that we don't dare, it's because we don't dare that they are difficult." This quote reveals the root of paralysis. The longer you put it off, the bigger the fear becomes. What seemed like a small obstacle grows, transforming into a giant in your imagination. But the moment you act, even though you're afraid, you discover the challenge was smaller than it seemed. Think of something you've put off because you thought you weren't ready. A conversation, a project, a change. Time passed, and the feeling of preparation never arrived. This happens because ready isn't a point of arrival. It's a myth created by the mind to avoid discomfort. Real preparation only happens within movement. It's by walking that you learn to walk. It's by talking that you learn to speak. It's by facing that you learn to overcome. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that life is too short to wait. He wrote, "You must not behave as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death looms over you. While you live, while you can, be good." Applied to fear, this means, while you wait to feel ready, life is passing you by. The opportunity that exists today may not exist tomorrow. Acting before you're ready isn't irresponsible, it's practical wisdom. Because you'll never have all the answers, you'll never have complete control over your circumstances, and you don't need to. What you need is to take the first step with what you have now. Learning will come in the process, not in the waiting. Here's today's practice. Choose something you've been putting off out of fear or insecurity. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be starting a project, sending a message, making a decision. Instead of waiting to feel confident, just make the first move. Remember, courage doesn't eliminate fear, it accompanies it. And confidence is built when you prove to yourself, through actions, that you can do it. Think of an athlete training for a marathon. They don't start by running 26.2 miles. They start with short strides, imperfect training, mistakes, and adjustments. But if they waited until they were ready, they'd never start. It's the same with life. You don't have to run the entire marathon today. You just need to take the first step, even with your heart racing. Act before you're ready, because the truth is, no one is ever completely prepared. Fear will always try to convince you otherwise, but each time you act despite it, you discover that the strength you were looking for was already within you. If this lesson spoke to you, write in the comments, "Today I act, even though I'm insecure." Because in the end, the secret is not waiting for confidence, but acting until it appears. Fear will never completely disappear. It will always be there, at some level, trying to convince you to stop, to postpone, to believe you're not capable. But now you know. You don't have to wait for fear to go away to start living. What truly transforms is acting despite it. The Stoics never promised a life without pain, obstacles, or fear. What they taught was something even more powerful. Life is too short to be wasted in paralysis. Fear may knock on the door, but the decision to let it in or not is always yours. And every time you choose to act, even when unsure, you are saying to yourself, "I am not a hostage to my mind. I am bigger than the stories it makes up." You may not realize it right away, but every small act of courage builds a stronger character, a clearer mind, and a freer life. Fear doesn't disappear, but it does lose its strength. And confidence doesn't appear suddenly, but is born from the accumulation of steps taken despite insecurity. Today's final practice is a commitment. Write in the comments, "Today, I act despite fear." This simple phrase is a way of showing to yourself and to the world that you choose to live more courageously. And if this message touched you, share this video with someone who needs courage right now, because just as fear is contagious, so is courage. And sometimes, a firm word is all it takes to ignite strength in another person.